Picture this. It's 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'm standing in my work boots on my own damn lawn, coffee steam mixing with mountain air so crisp it makes your lungs ache, staring at a bright yellow for sale sign someone planted on my property like they own the place. Lakefront community access, $850,000 for my grandfather's lake, on my land. And there's Karen Whitmore, HOA president, professional busybody, destroyer of neighborhood peace, standing beside it in her militant khaki uniform, clipboard clutched like a weapon, perfectly blow-dried hair defying the 6 a.m. hour. That smug little smile says she's already called backup. Deputy Rodriguez stands between us, poor guy clearly wondering how property theft became his Tuesday morning problem. Here's the thing. Karen thought she was going to steal my lake and sell it to the highest bidder. She had no idea what she'd just started. What would you do if someone tried to sell your property out from under you? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. My name's Marcus Kellerman, and 18 months ago I inherited something most people only dream about: 40 acres of pristine Colorado mountain ranch, complete with an 8-acre natural lake that's been in my family since 1962. My grandfather Gus built this place with his bare hands, one log at a time, back when Pine Ridge Valley was nothing but elk trails and wildflower meadows. I'd spent 15 years running heavy equipment in Denver, saving every penny I could scrape together, dreaming of the day I could quit the city rat race and move up here full-time. The sound of cattle lowing in the distance, the scent of pine needles thick as honey in the morning air. This was my slice of heaven, paid for with decades of sweat and my grandfather's stubborn refusal to sell to developers. The lake sits like a jewel in the center of the property, fed by a natural spring that's never run dry, not even during the worst drought years. From my grandfather's hand-built cabin perched on the small bluff overlooking the water, you can see for miles across the valley. Every morning I'd walk down to the lake, gravel crunching under my boots, and thank the old man for holding on to this piece of paradise. But paradise has neighbors, and sometimes those neighbors are named Karen Whitmore. Pine Ridge Valley Estates sprouted up around my ranch about 8 years ago. 35 cookie-cutter homes priced north of $500,000 each, complete with their own little HOA kingdom. Karen bought the lot directly adjacent to my property 3 years back for $180,000, and from day one, she made it clear she considered my lake part of her view package. Karen's the retired bank manager type, you know the kind. Every blade of grass measured, every rule enforced, every neighbor's business, her personal crusade. The woman runs her HOA like a military operation, complete with violation notices printed on official letterhead and a sprinkler system so perfectly timed you could set your watch by the clicking of those heads rotating through their zones every morning at exactly 6:15 a.m. The trouble started last spring with her son's wedding. Picture this. Karen shows up at my door all smiles and fake sweetness, asking if she could borrow my lake for wedding photos. Not rent, borrow, like it's a cup of sugar. It would mean so much to Brandon, she says, batting her eyelashes. Just a few pictures by the water. Being a decent neighbor, I said, sure, couple photos, no problem. Next thing I know, there's a convoy of cars rolling down my private dirt road. Wedding photographer, 6 groomsmen in matching suspenders, 3 bridesmaids with professional makeup, and Karen directing traffic like she owns the place. They're setting up fishing poles, planning a whole lakeside cocktail hour, talking about where to put the DJ. Whoa, hold up, I said, walking down from the cabin. I agreed to a few photos, not a full production. That's when Karen's mask slipped. Her face went nuclear red and she started screaming about how I was ruining her son's special day and being selfish with community resources. Community resources, my lake, on my land, that my family had owned for 60 years. This lake should belong to everyone, she shrieked, loud enough to scatter every bird within a half-mile radius. You can't just hoard natural beauty, I politely asked them to leave. Karen promised this wasn't over. She was right about that part. The harassment started the next week. Daily HOA violation notices appeared in my mailbox like clockwork. My grandfather's vintage tractor was unsightly agricultural equipment. The original ranch-style split-rail fencing was inappropriate for the community aesthetic, and my rooster crowing at dawn constituted a noise violation. Each notice threatened $50 daily fines, certified mail, and legal action. I spent my evenings researching property law instead of enjoying my retirement. Neighbors who used to wave started avoiding eye contact, afraid of getting on Karen's bad side. The local attorney, Bill Crawford, explained that HOA rules don't apply to pre-existing properties, but filing fees and consultations had already cost me $1,200. That's when I realized Karen Whitmore wasn't just a difficult neighbor. She was a woman on a mission to steal my lake, one violation notice at a time. Karen's next move was pure genius. If you define genius as criminally stupid with a side of fraud. She hired a surveyor. Not just any surveyor, mind you, but her brother-in-law Rick, whose biggest qualification seemed to be owning a measuring tape and sharing Karen's DNA. Rick showed up one morning in a pickup truck held together by duct tape and delusion, carrying equipment that looked like it survived the Carter administration. "Just doing a routine boundary check," Rick announced, setting up his ancient transit like he actually knew what he was doing. The smell of his cigarettes mixed with diesel exhaust from his rattling truck created an aromatic cloud of incompetence that hung over my property line like a toxic fog. By afternoon, Rick had planted survey stakes claiming my lake extended onto community easement land. Not some of it, half of it. According to Rick's professional assessment, the Pine Ridge Valley HOA had rights to 4 acres of my 8-acre lake, including the best fishing spots and the natural swimming area. Karen posted official-looking notices around the neighborhood about a pending boundary adjustment. Suddenly, every soccer mom in the subdivision was buzzing about potential lakefront access. Property values could skyrocket with shared waterfront amenities. I started getting hostile phone calls from neighbors demanding I cooperate with the community. The coffee shop went dead silent whenever I walked in. Conversation stopped mid-sentence like I was some kind of pariah hoarding the community treasure chest. "You know," said Janet from Lot 17, cornering me at the hardware store, "some people think property ownership comes with social responsibility." Social responsibility. Right. Like the social responsibility of not lying about property boundaries. Here's what Karen didn't know. My grandfather wasn't just a rancher. He was a meticulous record keeper. Every document, every survey, every piece of paper that proved ownership, he kept it all in an old military trunk in the cabin's back bedroom. The old man used to tell me, "Marcus, when someone questions what's yours, you better have the papers to prove it." I spent 3 days digging through decades of paperwork, breathing in the scent of old leather and dust until I found what I was looking for, the original 1962 Federal Land Patent Survey. Hand-drawn boundaries, GPS coordinates, elevation markers, the works. Every square inch of that lake was mine, dating back to when the federal government first sold the land to settlers. Time for some professional help. Bill Crawford had warned me about situations like this during our first consultation. "Always hire a licensed surveyor when boundaries are disputed," he'd said. "It's expensive up front, but saves thousands in legal fees later. A professional survey holds up in court. Your neighbor's cousin with a tape measure doesn't." Tom Harrison showed up with equipment that actually looked like it belonged in this century. GPS units that could pinpoint a golf ball on Mars, and 3 decades of experience drawing property lines. $2,800 later, I had bulletproof documentation of every boundary marker on my land. Tom's survey confirmed what I already knew. Every drop of water in that lake belonged to me. But here's where things got interesting. Tom discovered something fascinating about Rick's fraudulent survey stakes. "See these markers your neighbor planted?" Tom said, pointing to Rick's handiwork with barely concealed disgust. "They're not just wrong, they're deliberately misleading. This isn't incompetence, it's fraud." The plot thickened like good gravy. Turns out Rick had lost his surveying license in neighboring Jefferson County 3 years earlier for exactly this kind of boundary manipulation. He'd been running a side business helping developers claim disputed land by fudging measurements and backdating surveys. Karen had hired the surveying equivalent of a back alley surgeon. I documented everything. Photographed Rick's fake stakes, copied his fraudulent survey notes, recorded GPS coordinates of every bogus marker. The crisp mountain air carried the satisfying sound of justice clicking into place, one piece of evidence at a time. Karen's reaction to the professional survey was predictable, complete denial mixed with escalating desperation. She filed a complaint with the county assessor, claiming I was hiding true property lines to avoid higher taxes. She spread rumors at the grocery store that I was planning to turn the lake into a commercial fishing operation with tour buses and parking fees. But here's what really told me Karen was getting desperate. She started holding impromptu neighborhood meetings in her backyard, the sound of her voice carrying across the morning air as she built her coalition of the confused. "Marcus Kellerman thinks he can keep our lake all to himself," I heard her telling anyone who'd listen. "This is about community rights versus individual greed. Our lake, like it had ever belonged to anyone but my family." 3 neighbors filed formal complaints with the county. The local Facebook group split into Team Marcus versus Team Community Access factions. The Pine Ridge Valley HOA called an emergency meeting to discuss the lake situation. Sitting in my grandfather's cabin that night, looking out over the water he'd protected his whole life, I realized something important. This wasn't going to end with surveys and documentation. Karen Whitmore had declared war, and she was just getting started. The smell of pine smoke from my fireplace mixed with the scent of coming rain. Storm clouds were building on both horizons. If Karen thought fraudulent surveys were her ace in the hole, she clearly hadn't studied the playbook on how to destroy your own credibility. Her next brilliant strategy: turn me into Pine Ridge Valley's most wanted. It started with the noise complaints. Karen called the sheriff's office 3 times in 1 week, claiming I was running an industrial operation at dawn. What industrial operation, you ask? Me starting my work truck at 6:30 a.m. to head to my construction job. Apparently, the sound of a diesel engine warming up violated Karen's constitutional right to suburban silence. "We've got reports of suspicious vehicles coming and going at all hours," Deputy Rodriguez explained during his second visit that week, looking embarrassed. The suspicious vehicles turned out to be my work truck, my neighbor Bob's pickup when he stopped by to borrow tools, and the FedEx guy delivering a replacement part for my grandfather's vintage tractor. But Karen's masterpiece was the environmental violation complaint. She called the county claiming to witness ecological destruction because my cattle, all 6 of them, were drinking from the lake. You know, like cattle have done since the dawn of time. Like my grandfather's cattle had done for 60 years without causing the environmental apocalypse. "Ma'am," Deputy Rodriguez said during what I'm pretty sure was his most awkward conversation of the year, "cattle drinking from a natural water source isn't actually illegal." The sound of his police radio crackling with real emergencies made the absurdity even more obvious. Here's a guy who should be chasing actual criminals, instead babysitting a property dispute between neighbors who can't play nice. I learned something important during those weeks. Documentation is your best friend when dealing with crazy. My grandfather used to say, "Son, when someone's trying to make you look bad, make sure you've got proof of who's actually behaving badly." Smart old bird. I installed security cameras around the property perimeter, started recording every interaction with Karen and her flying monkeys, and created a detailed log of harassment incidents with timestamps. Every fake violation notice, every bogus police call, every piece of manufactured drama went into my growing evidence file. That's when the cameras caught something interesting. Picture this. 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night, and there's Karen Whitmore creeping around my property line like some suburban ninja. My motion-activated cameras lit her up like a Christmas tree as she systematically removed every no trespassing sign I'd posted along the fence line. But wait, there's more. The next morning, Karen filed another environmental complaint with the county, claiming she'd witnessed me dumping litter around the lake. What litter, you ask? The same fast food containers and beer cans she'd scattered there herself the night before, clearly visible on my security footage. The crisp night air had carried every sound of her amateur sabotage mission. Footsteps crunching through pine needles, the metallic clang of fence posts as she worked, even her muttered complaints about selfish property owners echoing across the valley. When Deputy Rodriguez showed up to investigate the litter complaint, I had a little surprise waiting for him. "Deputy, before you write any reports, you might want to see this," I said, pulling up the security footage on my laptop. We watched Karen's midnight trespassing adventure in high-definition color, complete with audio of her planting evidence and removing my signs. Rodriguez shook his head like a man questioning his career choices. "Mr. Kellerman, I'm going to need copies of all this footage for my report, and you might want to talk to a lawyer about filing charges." That afternoon brought Karen's next escalation: bureaucratic warfare. She filed a complaint with the state environmental agency about my unlicensed cattle operation. Never mind that my 6 cows were perfectly legal and had been grazing this land since before Karen was born. She reported me to the county building department for unpermitted structures, targeting my grandfather's 60-year-old barn that was older than half the county officials. The fire marshal got a call about brush fire hazards from my natural vegetation. Each false report triggered an official inspection, costing me time I should have been spending at work and stress I didn't need in my life. But here's the thing about government inspectors. They know the difference between legitimate concerns and petty neighbor disputes. Every official who came out took one look around, realized they were dealing with a pristine ranch property, and started asking pointed questions about who was filing these complaints. "Between you and me," said the environmental inspector, a weathered guy named Pete who'd been doing this job for 20 years, "we see this pattern sometimes. Usually means someone's got an agenda that has nothing to do with actual violations." The community center reeked of tension and burnt coffee during that month's HOA meeting. Karen had prepared a PowerPoint presentation, because of course she had, titled "Protecting Our Community Values." She'd somehow obtained aerial photos of my property and was pointing out violations, like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. But when I stood up with my professional survey results and my growing collection of Karen's documented harassment, the room's energy shifted like air pressure before a thunderstorm. Several neighbors started asking uncomfortable questions about Karen's methods. The tide was beginning to turn, but Karen wasn't done fighting dirty yet. Karen's next move proved she'd graduated from neighborhood nuisance to full-blown media manipulator. "If you can't win with facts, why not try fiction?" She called the local newspaper with a sob story that would make Hollywood screenwriters weep with envy. According to Karen's version of reality, I was a wealthy landowner hoarding natural resources from hardworking families. She painted herself as a modern-day David fighting the Goliath of property rights, a community advocate standing up to greed and selfishness. "This is about basic fairness," Karen told reporter Janet Mills, her voice dripping with manufactured sincerity. "One man shouldn't be able to monopolize a natural wonder that could benefit dozens of families. Children should be able to experience the beauty of that lake." The story hit the Pine Ridge Valley Gazette's front page with the headline, "Lake Access Dispute Divides Community." So that Karen had somehow positioned herself as the underdog fighting for the common good, while I came across as the villain hoarding my inherited privilege. My phone started ringing with angry voicemails from people I'd never met. "You should be ashamed of yourself," snarled one caller. "That lake belongs to everyone." Social media exploded with the hashtag #ShareTheLake, complete with aerial photos of my property and demands that I do the right thing. The local TV news picked up the story as their feel-good human interest piece of the week. There was Karen standing at my property line with a handful of neighborhood kids, talking about community values and shared natural heritage. The camera angle made it look like I was some kind of feudal lord denying peasants access to the village well. That's when I realized Karen had made a critical tactical error. She'd escalated this into a public relations war, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I actually had the law on my side. My attorney Bill Crawford filed a harassment restraining order that read like a greatest hits collection of Karen's crazy. 3 pages of documented false police reports, trespassing incidents, defamation, and what the legal world politely calls intentional infliction of emotional distress. We sent cease and desist letters to the HOA demanding they stop sending violation notices for a property they had no jurisdiction over. The court filing revealed something fascinating that Karen had probably hoped would stay buried forever. Bill had done his homework, digging through public records like a bloodhound following a scent trail. Turns out our community advocate had a history of neighbor harassment going back years. In her previous neighborhood, Karen had filed boundary disputes with 3 different property owners. She'd claimed her neighbors' vegetable gardens violated community aesthetic standards, demanded one family remove a treehouse because it blocked her view, and tried to force another neighbor to cut down mature oak trees that predated the subdivision by decades. The pattern was always the same. Karen would identify something she wanted, manufacture a community benefit angle, then launch an escalating campaign of harassment until she got her way or the neighbors moved. She was like a neighborhood serial killer, but instead of bodies, she left behind a trail of for sale signs and broken community relationships. The sound of papers rustling filled Bill Crawford's office as he spread out Karen's legal history like evidence at a crime scene. "Your neighbor has what we call a vexatious litigant pattern," he explained. "She uses legal harassment as a weapon to get what she wants." But Karen wasn't done fighting dirty. In fact, she was just getting warmed up. She convinced the HOA board to file a lawsuit against the county assessor, claiming my property had been illegally exempted from community development standards. Her argument? The lake should be designated as a community resource and taken through eminent domain for the greater good of Pine Ridge Valley residents. This time, she hired serious legal firepower, a downtown Denver law firm specializing in property disputes. These weren't small-town attorneys dabbling in neighbor squabbles. These were lawyers who charged more per hour than most people made in a week. The smell of fear and desperation filled the community center during the emergency HOA meeting where Karen announced the lawsuit. When residents discovered she'd spent $45,000 in association funds without proper authorization, the room erupted like a pressure cooker with a broken valve. "You did what with our money?" shouted Bob Henderson from Lot 23, his face redder than a stop sign. "We never voted on this," added Sarah Jamie, frantically flipping through her copy of the HOA bylaws. "Legal expenditures over $5,000 require a majority vote." That's when I realized something beautiful was happening. Karen's nuclear option had backfired spectacularly. By escalating to expensive lawyers and unauthorized spending, she'd turned her own community against her. Property owners were suddenly doing math, calculating how much Karen's personal vendetta was going to cost them in special assessments and legal fees. Several neighbors who'd been avoiding me for months suddenly found the courage to approach with quiet apologies and offers of support. The coffee shop conversations no longer stopped when I walked in. Instead, I started hearing whispers about Karen's financial irregularities and abuse of authority. Karen had wanted a war, and she was about to get one. But she'd forgotten the oldest rule in the book. When you're fighting dirty, make sure your own house is clean first. Sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor. Just when you think your neighbor has done her worst, legal discovery opens up a whole new world of "What the hell were you thinking, Karen?" Bill Crawford's subpoena of the HOA financial records read like a masterclass in creative accounting. Karen hadn't just been misappropriating association funds. She'd been running the Pine Ridge Valley HOA like her personal piggy bank for 3 solid years. The numbers were staggering. $78,000 in administrative expenses that somehow found their way into the pockets of Karen's relatives. Her son Brandon, the same one whose wedding photos started this whole mess, had been paid $15,000 for community newsletter design. The newsletter in question? Photocopied flyers with Comic Sans font that looked like a middle schooler's homework assignment. Karen's nephew Jake ran a landscaping company that charged triple market rate for basic maintenance. $300 to mow a quarter acre of common area grass. $500 for trimming shrubs that should have cost $50. The invoices were signed off by Karen herself, approving payments to her own family members without a single competitive bid. But here's where it got really interesting. Karen's former colleague from the bank, a guy named Dennis Walsh, had been collecting legal consultation fees for routine HOA advice. $1,500 to explain how to file a complaint with the county. $2,000 for reviewing a standard landscaping contract. This wasn't legal counsel. It was legalized theft with a business card. The HOA Reserve Fund told the real story. 3 years ago, Pine Ridge Valley had a healthy $120,000 emergency fund for major repairs and unexpected expenses. Today, $23,000 and change. Karen had essentially embezzled nearly $100,000 from her own neighbors. County property records revealed another delicious twist in Karen's web of lies. She'd bought her lot in 2021 for $180,000. But the same property was assessed at only $95,000 due to something called limited access designation. Turns out Karen's taxes were artificially low because of drainage easement restrictions that nobody bothered to mention during her buyer's remorse campaign. If those restrictions were properly enforced, Karen owed $4,300 in back property taxes, plus penalties and interest. The smell of financial fraud hung in the air like smoke from a dumpster fire. But the real bombshell was buried in Karen's property title, a conditional access clause from the original development that nobody had paid attention to in years. The legal language was dense as concrete, but Bill Crawford translated it into plain English that made my day. If the property owner can prove HOA financial mismanagement or harassment of neighboring landowners, Bill read from the dusty title documents, access rights to the conditional property revert to the county for review and potential termination. Karen's driveway crossed a county easement that could be legally restricted if certain conditions were met. conditions like, say, documented financial fraud and harassment of property owners. Her lot could become essentially landlocked if the access agreement got terminated. The mortgage discovery was the cherry on top of this legal sundae. Karen had refinanced her home just 6 months ago, telling the lender that lake proximity increased her property value by $180,000. Her current mortgage balance exceeded the actual appraised value of her land without that imaginary lake access premium. If the bank discovered she'd inflated property values with fraudulent claims about shared water rights, they could call her loan immediately. Karen was leveraged to the eyeballs based on lies about assets she didn't own. Every HOA member was potentially liable for Karen's mismanagement. Special assessments of $2,200 per household would be needed just to cover the legal bills she'd racked up in her personal war against me. Several families were looking at potential liens on their properties to pay for Karen's crimes. The calculator keys clicked like typewriter keys as residents tallied their potential losses, the sound echoing through living rooms across Pine Ridge Valley as the true cost of Karen's leadership became clear. I'd been playing defense for 18 months, but suddenly I realized I was holding all the winning cards. Karen's entire house of cards was built on fraud, lies, and other people's money. Time to start playing offense. You know what they say about the best laid plans? Well, mine were about to get a whole lot better than Karen's amateur hour scheming. Bill Crawford was practically vibrating with excitement when we met to discuss strategy. Marcus, in 25 years of practice, I've rarely seen such a clear-cut case of HOA fraud combined with harassment. This isn't just about your property rights anymore. This is about criminal justice. The team assembled itself like something out of a legal thriller. Sarah Martinez, a forensic accountant who specialized in white-collar crime, volunteered to analyze the HOA books pro bono after hearing about the case through her church. Deputy Rodriguez, while maintaining official neutrality, provided informal guidance about building a solid criminal case that would stick in court. 3 brave souls from the HOA board, Bob Henderson, Sarah Jamie, and retired teacher Margaret Walsh, privately agreed to support the investigation. They'd been watching Karen's financial shenanigans for months, too intimidated by her aggressive personality to speak up until now. We knew something was wrong, Margaret admitted during a quiet conversation at the coffee shop, her voice barely above a whisper. But Karen made everyone afraid to question her decisions. She had this way of making you feel stupid for asking about money. The legal strategy unfolded like a chess match where I was finally playing 3 moves ahead instead of constantly reacting to Karen's chaos. We filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office detailing Karen's financial misconduct, requested a criminal investigation through the district attorney, and prepared a comprehensive civil lawsuit against Karen personally for harassment, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Bill explained the key legal tactics that would nail Karen's coffin shut. A quiet title action would force the court to definitively establish my property boundaries, something I should have done months ago. Always get professional surveys when buying property with disputed boundaries, Bill had warned during our first meeting, advice that proved golden. It's expensive up front but saves thousands in litigation costs later. The tortious interference claim was beautiful in its simplicity. Karen's harassment campaign had damaged my property value and destroyed my peaceful enjoyment of the land. Harassment that creates measurable financial harm can result in significant damages, Bill explained, his eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a lawyer who'd found the perfect legal weapon. The breach of fiduciary duty charge would hit Karen where it hurt most, her wallet and her reputation. HOA officers are legally required to act in their members' best interests, not their own, Sarah Martinez explained during her analysis of the books. This level of self-dealing is textbook embezzlement. Demand detailed financial reports from any HOA before buying property in their jurisdiction. But the real genius move was the financial counterstrike that would turn Karen's own weapons against her. Sarah's investigation revealed that Karen's access easement could be legally terminated under the original development agreements. I tracked down Tom Wilkins, the retired developer now living in Arizona, through a combination of county records and old-fashioned detective work. "That woman's been nothing but trouble since day one," Tom growled over the phone, his voice carrying the weight of someone who dealt with difficult homeowners for decades. "I specifically included those termination clauses to prevent exactly this kind of abuse. I'll sell you those access rights for $25,000 and good riddance." The community organizing happened faster than Karen could have imagined. The HOA Reform Committee formed organically as residents discovered the true scope of her financial crimes. People started sharing stories, inflated contractor bills that benefited Karen's relatives, mysterious emergency expenses that never seemed to fix anything, intimidation tactics used to silence anyone who asked uncomfortable questions. The evidence boxes multiplied like rabbits. 3 years of suspicious invoices, documented kickback schemes, falsified expense reports, and unauthorized expenditures. The smell of old paper and printer toner filled Margaret Walsh's dining room as we organized the mountain of documentation that would bury Karen's credibility forever. Meanwhile, I was positioning myself for the ultimate power move. Karen's lot would inevitably go into foreclosure once her mortgage fraud came to light. Bill Crawford walked me through the sheriff's sale process, how auctions work, bidding strategies, and legal requirements for property acquisition. The technical preparation was thorough as a military operation. My security camera system got upgraded to monitor every approach to the property. A GPS boundary survey established exact property lines down to the inch, eliminating any future disputes. An environmental impact study proved my lake posed zero threat to community health or safety. A professional appraisal confirmed what I'd suspected. My property was worth over $1.2 million, making Karen's attempted theft even more audacious. The media counter-narrative was already building momentum. Janet Mills at the Pine Ridge Valley Gazette was investigating the HOA financial irregularities, armed with evidence packages that painted Karen as a common criminal hiding behind community activism. The trap was set, the evidence gathered, and the timeline established. Within 2 weeks, criminal referrals would be filed. The civil lawsuit would follow immediately. An emergency HOA election would remove Karen from power. And if everything went according to plan, I'd own Karen's property within 60 days, turning her harassment headquarters into something the whole community could actually benefit from. The sound of wind through pine trees seemed to carry my grandfather's approval from beyond. Time to finish what Karen started. They say desperate people do desperate things. But Karen Whitmore redefined the concept when she discovered the criminal investigation was closing in on her like a pack of bloodhounds following a money trail. Her first clue came through the legal gossip network. Apparently, her expensive Denver attorney let slip during a bar association cocktail party that the Whitmore case was attracting unwanted attention from the state attorney general's office. Word traveled fast in Colorado's legal community, especially when it involved HOA fraud and potential criminal charges. Karen's reaction was swift, stupid, and beautifully self-incriminating. At 2:17 a.m. on a Wednesday night, my upgraded security cameras caught Karen breaking into the Pine Ridge Valley Community Center like some middle-aged cat burglar. The motion sensors lit up the parking lot as she jimmied the back door with what looked like a crowbar, her perfectly coiffed hair hidden under a black knit cap that made her look like a suburban bank robber. The sound of glass breaking echoed across the valley as Karen smashed the locks on the HOA filing cabinets. My cameras captured everything in high-definition detail, Karen frantically stuffing financial documents into garbage bags, her hands shaking as she tried to destroy 3 years of evidence. But here's where Karen's criminal mastermind plan fell apart faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. She decided to burn the evidence right there in the community center parking lot, creating a bonfire that could be seen from space and filling the night air with the acrid smell of burning paper and melting plastic. Deputy Rodriguez arrived on scene within minutes, called by 3 different neighbors who reported the fire. Karen was caught red-handed, literally covered in ash and soot, standing next to a pile of smoldering HOA documents like some deranged arsonist having a breakdown. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for burglary, vandalism, and destruction of evidence," Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a cop finally getting to arrest someone who actually deserved it. The irony was delicious. Karen's attempt to destroy evidence had created additional felony charges while accomplishing exactly nothing. The HOA management company maintained digital backup copies of everything, and Sarah Martinez had already photographed the most damaging financial records weeks earlier. News of Karen's arrest spread through Pine Ridge Valley faster than wildfire in August. The community center became a pilgrimage site as residents drove by to see the scorch marks on the asphalt where their HOA president had literally tried to burn the evidence of her crimes. The emergency HOA meeting that followed was standing room only, packed with residents who finally understood they'd been living under the thumb of a common criminal. The smell of fear and anger was thick as cigarette smoke in the overheated room. "How much of our money did she steal?" demanded Janet from Lot 17, her voice shaking with rage. "Are we going to lose our homes because of this?" asked Bob Henderson, clutching a calculator like a life preserver. But Karen wasn't done destroying her own life just yet. Released on bail pending trial, she immediately launched the most vicious character assassination campaign I'd ever witnessed. If she was going down, she was determined to take me with her. Karen created fake social media accounts to post defamatory content about my secret criminal history, completely fabricated stories about environmental violations, tax evasion, and animal cruelty. She spread rumors that I was planning to turn the ranch into a commercial development, complete with hotels and parking lots. Marcus Kellerman orchestrated this entire investigation to steal lake access for himself, Karen told anyone who would listen, her voice carrying across the morning air as she cornered neighbors at their mailboxes. "He's a manipulative sociopath who's destroyed our community for personal gain." The lies multiplied like cancer cells. According to Karen's version of reality, I'd somehow convinced the state attorney general, multiple law enforcement agencies, and a forensic accountant to participate in an elaborate conspiracy to frame an innocent HOA president. Bill Crawford filed an additional defamation lawsuit, armed with screenshots of every fake social media post and recordings of Karen's slanderous statements. Each lie she told provided more evidence for our growing collection of civil and criminal charges. Meanwhile, the financial noose was tightening around Karen's neck like a perfectly fitted collar. Her mortgage company discovered the fraud investigation through local news coverage and immediately called her loan due to material misrepresentation. Karen had 30 days to pay $340,000 or face foreclosure proceedings. Her frantic attempts to refinance failed spectacularly when criminal background checks revealed pending felony charges. No legitimate lender would touch her with a 10-foot pole. That's when Karen made her final desperate play, a bribery attempt so clumsy it belonged in a comedy movie. She cornered me at this hardware store, surrounded by paint cans and the smell of sawdust, and offered $50,000 in cash to drop all criminal complaints and civil lawsuits. "This has gone far enough," Karen hissed, her voice barely controlled. "Take the money and walk away, or I'll make your life a living hell." The digital recorder in my jacket pocket caught every word. Bill Crawford had advised me to document any contact with Karen, and her bribery attempt just added another felony to her growing collection of criminal charges. The community financial reckoning was brutal. Special assessments of $2,800 per household to cover Karen's legal debts. Property values plummeting as the HOA scandal became public record. 3 families already had their houses on the market rather than pay for Karen's crimes. The sheriff's auction was scheduled for 3 weeks away, and I was pre-qualified with a $400,000 cashier's check. Karen's reign of terror was about to become my ultimate victory. You'd think getting arrested for arson and bribery would teach someone to keep their mouth shut, but Karen Whitmore apparently skipped that lesson in Criminal Behavior 101. From her jail cell, Karen used her single daily phone call like a propaganda hotline, contacting every media outlet that would listen to her sob story. The jail phone system recorded everything, a fact that Karen either forgot or was too desperate to care about. "I'm the victim of a wealthy landowner conspiracy," Karen's voice crackled through the recorded line to Channel 7 News. "Marcus Kellerman has corrupted law enforcement, bribed government officials, and destroyed an innocent community leader who dared to stand up for property rights." The recordings became Exhibit A in our expanding criminal case. Nothing quite says guilty as charged like trying to obstruct justice from a jail cell while claiming to be the real victim. Meanwhile, Janet Mills at the Pine Ridge Valley Gazette was having the time of her journalistic life. Her 3-part series on HOA corruption hit the stands like a bombshell, complete with photocopies of fraudulent invoices, Karen's fake survey documents, and a timeline of financial crimes that read like a masterclass in how not to run a homeowners association. The story got picked up by Denver Television News as a cautionary tale about unchecked HOA power. Suddenly, reporters were calling me for interviews, treating this backwoods property dispute like it was the Pentagon Papers of suburban governance. "Mr. Kellerman, how does it feel to expose this level of corruption in your own neighborhood?" asked the perfectly coiffed Channel 9 reporter, her camera crew trampling my flower beds in their enthusiasm to get the perfect shot of my lake. I kept my answers brief and factual, letting the evidence speak for itself. Karen was doing a fine job destroying her own credibility without any help from me. The community revolt was swift and merciless. The emergency HOA meeting to remove Karen from all positions passed by a vote of 32-0. Even her most loyal supporters had abandoned ship when the criminal charges became public. Board members who'd enabled Karen's financial crimes faced their own recall elections as residents demanded accountability from top to bottom. "We trusted her," Margaret Walsh said during the packed community meeting, tears streaming down her weathered face. "We thought she was protecting our property values, but she was stealing from us the whole time." Karen's family became collateral damage in her war against reality. Her son Brandon's wedding venue canceled their contract after seeing news coverage of the criminal charges. Her husband lost his job at First National Bank when his association with a criminal investigation became a liability for the institution's reputation. The smell of desperation hung over the Whitmore household like smoke from a house fire as they were forced to sell vehicles, jewelry, and family heirlooms to pay for legal defense. Karen's social circle evaporated overnight. Former friends crossed the street to avoid being associated with Pine Ridge Valley's most notorious criminal. The auction preparation moved forward like clockwork. Professional property inspections revealed Karen's lot had septic system problems that would cost $15,000 to repair, plus drainage issues in the backyard that explained the original limited access designation. My bid strategy accounted for necessary repairs while keeping me well within budget for the ultimate real estate acquisition. Bill Crawford ensured all legal documents were ready for immediate property transfer. "Sheriff's sales move fast," he warned. "Cash only, no financing contingencies, and you take possession within days of winning the bid." Karen's final court appearance was anticlimactic after months of dramatic escalation. Facing a mountain of evidence that would have impressed a federal prosecutor, she pleaded guilty to fraud, embezzlement, harassment, and destruction of evidence in exchange for 18 months in state prison, plus full restitution to the HOA. The judge's gavel fell like the final nail in Karen's coffin. A permanent restraining order prevented any future contact with me or my property. The sound echoed through the courthouse like justice itself being served with a side of cosmic irony. But the best part was still coming. Tom Wilkins, the retired developer in Arizona, was so disgusted by Karen's behavior that he donated the community access easement to me for free. "I've dealt with difficult homeowners for 40 years, Tom said during our phone call, but that woman takes the prize for sheer vindictive stupidity. Use those access rights to teach the next generation what good neighbors actually look like." The legal documents transferring complete control of community access arrived by overnight delivery, smelling like leather and ink, an ultimate victory. Karen's war to steal my lake had inadvertently given me legal authority over the entire subdivision's property access. The acquisition strategy expanded beyond simple revenge into something more beautiful: community healing. I planned to convert Karen's lot into a neighborhood park and recreation area with playground equipment where her house had stood and walking trails connecting to the lake she'd tried so hard to steal. Community members pledged volunteer labor for the improvement project. The same neighbors who'd once avoided me were now planning weekend work parties to transform Karen's former headquarters of harassment into something that would actually benefit everyone. The sheriff's auction was scheduled for next Tuesday at 10 a.m. sharp. Pine Ridge Valley residents planned to attend as a show of support, ready to witness the final chapter of their HOA nightmare. Justice was about to be served with a real estate deed on the side. Tuesday morning at the courthouse steps looked like the finale of a small-town drama that Hollywood couldn't have scripted better. 200 spectators gathered in the crisp mountain air, their breath forming little clouds as they waited for justice to be served with a real estate gavel. Local TV news crews had set up their equipment like they were covering a presidential election. Newspaper photographers positioned themselves for the perfect shot. The sound of camera shutters clicking mixed with the murmur of excited conversations as Pine Ridge Valley residents finally got to witness their tormentor's downfall in real time. I stood calmly next to Bill Crawford, my cashier's check for $400,000 tucked safely in his briefcase. After 18 months of harassment, false accusations, and legal warfare, this moment felt like Christmas morning and Vindication Day rolled into one perfect package. "You ready for this?" Bill asked, adjusting his tie like a lawyer preparing for the performance of his career. "I was born ready," I replied, watching Karen's expensive Denver attorney make one last desperate attempt to delay the inevitable. The attorney filed a motion to stop the sale, claiming procedural irregularities, and insufficient notice to interested parties. Judge Patricia Morrison looked like a woman who'd heard every excuse in the book and wasn't impressed by creative legal fiction. Counselor, your client had months to address these concerns before pleading guilty to multiple felonies, Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who didn't suffer fools gladly. Motion denied. The auction will proceed as scheduled. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the courthouse square like a carnival barker announcing the main event. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to auction the property at 1247 Pine Ridge Circle, previously owned by Karen Whitmore, now available due to court-ordered foreclosure proceedings. 3 other bidders had shown up, including a property development company from Denver that clearly hadn't done their homework about septic system problems and drainage issues. Their representative looked confident in his expensive suit, probably thinking he was about to steal a bargain lakefront property. The bidding started at $200,000. I let the others play their hands first, watching as the development company pushed the price up to $280,000 before encountering their first real competition. An anonymous investor represented by phone who seemed determined to acquire Karen's lot at any cost. "Do I hear $300,000?" the auctioneer called out, his voice echoing off the courthouse walls. The development company raised their paddle. $320, $340, $360. The phone bidder kept countering every offer like they had unlimited funds and a personal vendetta against losing. At $380,000, the development company finally discovered the septic issues were going to cost more than their profit margin could handle. Their representative shook his head and stepped away from the bidding, leaving just me and the mysterious phone investor in the final showdown. $390,000 from the gentleman with the briefcase, the auctioneer announced, pointing at Bill Crawford. "Do I hear 400? Or?" The phone bidder hesitated. $400,000 for a lot with known problems was pushing the limits of reasonable investment, even for someone with deep pockets and questionable judgment. $410,000, I called out, my voice carrying across the crowd like a declaration of war ending in unconditional victory. Silence. The phone bidder had reached their limit. The auctioneer counted down from 10, his voice building drama like a game show host announcing the final answer. "Sold to Marcus Kellerman for $410,000. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause that echoed off the courthouse steps like thunder rolling through the mountains. Pine Ridge Valley residents cheered like their favorite team had just won the championship, while news cameras captured every moment of their collective celebration. "Mr. Kellerman," shouted Channel 7's reporter, shoving a microphone toward my face, "what are your plans for the property?" This was my moment. The mic drop line that would cap off 18 months of legal warfare with the perfect blend of justice and community spirit. "I'm turning Karen's lot into Pine Ridge Community Park," I announced, my voice carrying over the excited crowd. "There'll be a playground where her house used to stand, walking trails connecting to the lake, and picnic areas for neighborhood families. Karen spent months trying to steal my lake for herself. Now everyone gets to enjoy what she tried to take." The cheers got louder. Local residents hugged each other like they'd just been liberated from an occupying army. Margaret Walsh was crying tears of joy. Bob Henderson was calculating how much money the community park would add to property values, and Janet Mills was frantically taking notes for her follow-up article. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that it felt like the earth had tilted on its axis. Karen's former allies were shaking my hand and apologizing for their behavior. The same neighbors who'd avoided me for months were suddenly inviting me to barbecues and asking if I needed help with the park construction. "This is what community looks like," I told the assembled crowd, gesturing toward the excited faces surrounding us. "Not harassment and theft, but neighbors working together to build something beautiful." The morning air carried the sweet scent of victory mixed with pine needles and the promise of better days ahead. Karen's headquarters of hatred was about to become a symbol of healing, and justice had never tasted so satisfying. 6 months after the courthouse step celebration, Pine Ridge Community Park opened with a ribbon-cutting ceremony that would have made my grandfather proud. Where Karen's house once stood, the headquarters of 18 months of neighborhood warfare, children now played on swing sets and climbing structures while their parents enjoyed picnic lunches on tables built by volunteer labor. I spent $45,000 renovating the lot, transforming Karen's former battleground into something that actually brought the community together. The walking trail connecting the park to the lake became everyone's favorite evening stroll, with scenic overlooks where families could watch sunset reflections dance across the water that had started this whole crazy adventure. The sound of children's laughter replaced Karen's voice echoing across the valley with threats and complaints. Instead of the clicking of her militant sprinkler system marking time like a neighborhood metronome, we now heard the gentle splash of kids learning to fish, and the satisfied conversations of neighbors who'd finally learned what it meant to be actual neighbors. The first annual Pine Ridge Festival launched on the anniversary of the sheriff's auction, featuring local food trucks parked where Karen used to hold her impromptu harassment meetings. Live bluegrass music filled the mountain air, where her voice once carried poison and division. The festival raised $12,000 for the HOA Abuse Prevention Scholarship, money that would help law students learn to protect communities from future Karens. My personal healing came gradually, like morning light creeping across the lake's surface. The harassment was finally over, replaced by the peaceful routine my grandfather had always envisioned for this land. Morning coffee on the cabin porch tasted sweeter without the daily dose of manufactured drama. The lake became what it was always meant to be, a centerpiece of community life instead of a source of bitter conflict. The broader impact surprised everyone, especially me. Law schools started using our case as required reading for property rights and HOA reform courses. The Colorado State Legislature passed the Pine Ridge Act, requiring HOA financial transparency and independent oversight for associations managing more than $50,000 in annual dues. I found myself testifying before a legislative committee, explaining to lawmakers how unchecked HOA power could destroy communities and bankrupt innocent homeowners. The sound of the gavel echoing in the state capitol felt like my grandfather's legacy extending beyond our little valley into laws that would protect future families from Karen-style corruption. Karen's aftermath was swift and final. She served 14 months in minimum security prison, spending her days in the library researching appeals that never materialized. Her husband divorced her the day she was sentenced, taking their adult children and moving to Oregon to start over without the baggage of being married to Pine Ridge Valley's most notorious criminal. The financial justice was satisfying in its completeness. Criminal restitution payments slowly reimbursed the community for stolen funds, while my civil judgment provided additional compensation for harassment victims. HOA insurance settlements covered most legal expenses, and property values in Pine Ridge Valley not only recovered but exceeded pre-scandal levels. I partnered with the county to create a permanent conservation easement on the ranch, ensuring the lake and surrounding land would be protected from development forever. Local schools now use the property for educational programs about water conservation and wildlife management, giving kids hands-on lessons about environmental stewardship that my grandfather would have loved. The community leadership transformation was complete. The new HOA board operates with radical transparency, monthly financial reports published online, major decisions requiring supermajority votes, and independent oversight for any expenditure over $500. Pine Ridge Valley became a model community that other subdivisions study when implementing responsible self-governance. My reluctant role as an HOA reform advocate led to speaking engagements across Colorado, helping other victims of HOA abuse navigate the legal system and fight back against petty tyrants who mistake community leadership for personal empires. Just last week, I got a call from a desperate rancher in Wyoming facing a similar situation. Corrupt HOA president trying to claim his family's grazing land through fraudulent easement claims. But that's a story for another day, involving different mountains and a whole new cast of characters who think they can steal what isn't theirs. As I sit on my grandfather's porch this evening, watching neighborhood children play in the park that used to be Karen's house, the scent of pine needles and barbecue smoke from family dinners fills the air. The lake reflects golden sunset light while families enjoy their evening picnics, and the sound of contentment has finally replaced years of conflict. Got your own HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments. The Karen Stories community wants to hear how you fought back. Smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another epic tale of neighbors gone wrong and justice served cold. And remember, sometimes the sweetest revenge is turning your enemy's fortress into a playground where children laugh.